So we're going to start the meeting. My name is Lissa Weinman, and I chair the Federal Nuclear Waste Policy Committee of the Vermont Yankee Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. Today we are welcoming Dan Stetson to join us from California, from the San Onofre Generating Station. It's a decommissioning nuclear reactor near San Diego, California, actually on a military base. It's based on a base. And so how it's going to work is that Dan's going to give us a presentation for about 15 minutes or so. And we're going to look at some of his slides and listen, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. We'll start with committee members for the Q&A, and then go to members of the public. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dan Stetson. Dan is the voluntary chair of the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station's Community Engagement Panel, sort of a corollary to our own NDCAP here in Vermont. And he has served on the panel since its inception in 2014. Professionally, Dan is also the executive director and a trustee of the Nicholas Endowment, which gives grants in advance of science, education, and the arts in California and beyond, I think. Dan was also president and CEO of really a very well-known foundation, the Ocean Institute, from 2005 to 2015, after he actually joined the Institute in 1992. They are an educational nonprofit focused on marine science and maritime history, based in Dana Point, California, and they serve over 100,000 students every year. Dan was also working for a law firm that presided over one of the largest oil spills in Los Angeles history, Los Angeles Harbor history, and managed compensation for over 2,000 claimants in that case. He's also a veteran of the U.S. Coast Guard. Thank you for your service. So, yeah, I'd like to turn it over right now then to Dan. Welcome, Dan. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you so much for your kind words. It's an honor to be here today. So I do have a presentation, and Tony, thanks so much for, if you could put up the slides.
Certainly. Okay, they should be visible now.
Yeah. Thanks once again for the kind introduction. Please note that my comments today really, well, they represent my views and not necessarily those of the collective CEP and certainly not necessarily Southern California Edison. So if we could go to the next slide, please.
There we go.
As you can see, I've been involved with this, as mentioned, for quite a while. I've been on the community engagement panel since inception. I've also volunteered for Congressman Levin's Spent Nuclear Task Force. I've testified at a number of congressional meetings, including a subcommittee meeting, a field meeting. I testified during the Obama administration for the Department of Energy. Most recently, earlier this year, I made a presentation for Congressman Levin's and Flashman's their caucus for new Congress, for new members of Congress, and also for their staff. I've toured the plants, a couple of plants where Holtex plants where they make the canisters, and I've coordinated over 30 tours of songs. So I've seen it in a lot of different stages. So if we can go to the next slide, please. You know, my journey really started when I was at the Ocean Institute. We had a program there called the Adopted Class, and that was used to support schools that couldn't afford to come on their own. Well, Southern California was a support of that program, and one day I received a call from my contact at SCE, and he said, "Hey, Dan, would you take a call from the president of Edison?" And I was thinking, well, of course, at the very least, I should thank him for his support. In the back of my mind, I was thinking maybe he was going to give us some more money. Well, silly me. Next slide, please. he said, Dan, you probably heard that we're going to be decommissioning San Onofre. And so we're going to put together an engagement panel. It's going to be comprised of 18 individuals, and many of them are going to be elected officials. And they're going to be from a number of other stakeholders, from business, from organized labor, a number of other things. Anyway, the purpose of a panel is to act as a bridge so that SCE can inform the local community of what's going on, and the community can ask questions and provide some input. So, of course, I tried to hide my disappointment that we were not getting any money, and so I stalled and said, well, I really should check with my wife. And so that ended the meeting. I went to my wife, and not only did she say, no, you're not going to be on this panel, she said, hell no, there's nothing good that's going to come out of this. It's controversial. It might not even be safe. And I said, well, it's important. And I really think that I should. So fast forward 10 years, I'm now chair. If you go to the next slide, please. So the CEP meeting, we have quarterly meetings. We've done over 40 up to date. We also hold some special presentations. So the meetings are usually determined on a quarterly basis, and we have updates from Edison with timelines of what is going on. We bring in outside independent experts to provide some context and also an outside perspective on things. There's a period for questions and dialogue with CEP members and the general public. Of course, there's an opportunity, a full hour for public comment, and there's questions and dialogues with the experts in SCE. In the early days, we would have, a few hundred people show up these meetings. They were in person. During COVID, we went to online, and most recently, we've kind of gone back and forth. There have been some hybrid meetings, and also, the last one we had, which was just a few days ago, was online. And while many of the meetings used to go, 3 hours plus, this last meeting, for the first time ever, we didn't have a single public comment or a single question from the general public. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. Yeah, as mentioned, Songs is located on Camp Pendleton. And it's kind of a unique situation because the Navy or the Marine Corps is the landlord, and they charge Southern California for rent, especially for the ISFA seat. And then ironically, the Southern California Edison sues the federal government for reimbursement for that. And the proceeds from that come from the federal judgment fund, and it doesn't go through appropriations. So the next slide, please. The slide or the photo on the left shows the outlay of the plant itself, and immediately adjacent to that, you can see the 5 freeway. And as mentioned, that's with the U.S. Navy that has the partial jurisdiction over that. And then on the right, you see the parts that go underwater. And there's 4 conduits that are in this photo. And there's also a couple of other conduits from Unit 1, which you don't see. So there's a number of bodies, jurisdictional bodies, that have control over this. You have the Navy, then the offshore conduits are subject to a lease with the State Lands Commission. And most recent, in the last couple of years ago, Southern California Edison lobbied state lands to abandon those in place because removing them would actually do more damage than leaving them in place, and that was approved. Now, both areas fall under the jurisdiction of the California Coastal Commission. This is really important because they control a lot of different things. There's what's called a coastal development permit, and part of that has to oversight of the dry cast storage in terms of seismic safety, coastal erosion monitoring, and visual mitigation. So actually, Southern California Edison has to go back before the Coastal Commission in 2035. And if there has been a rise in the groundwater such that the Coastal Commission feels that they are endangering the ISFAC, then they could require those to be moved. And if they were going to do that, then the contingency plan would be to move the entire ISFAC over to where the domes currently are. Mm-hmm. So the other thing that the Coastal Commission has to do with, they're involved with long-term marine monitoring, coastal protection, and also mitigation things. Next slide, please. Here you can see a quick overlay of the plant's history. And actually, it goes back to Unit 1, which is now partially decommissioned. Parts of it are still underground, and actually the ISFAC, as I understand it, is on top of part of that. And then you can see Units 2 and 3, which have been shut down for a period of time now. Next slide, please. Here you can see 2 photos where they started. And then the photo on the right is what it's going to look like when the decommissioning is finished. The lower left, you can see the ISFAC, and up in the upper right, you can see the switch yard. And if you drive the 5 freeway, those wires are going to remain because it's an important switching station for power between between San Diego and Orange County. Next slide, please. Songs has 2 different types of canisters. The first are the storage that are done on a horizontal, and those are the Arriva ones you can see here. And those hold up to 24 assemblies. Next slide, please. And then it also has a series of canisters that are basically underground in a concrete structure, and those were developed by Holtec. And you can see what they look like here from its cross-section. Next slide, please. There are a total of 123 canisters, 3.5 million pounds of spent nuclear fuel. This is a good photo. On the left, you can see the Orano system, and on the right, you can see the Holtec system. Next slide, please.
Wow.
Well, as you can imagine, and you've probably heard, Southern California is very active with a number of groups that really are active in this space, and with them comes a lot of inaccurate information and a lot of fake news. I mean, some of the things have said that there's a ticking time bomb. It's a Fukushima waiting to happen. Next slide, please. But the truth is, actually, and then this is my opinion and the opinion of many others, that right now the canisters that are stored there are in a safe condition. And SCE has actually done a number of things that exceed the requirements of the NRC. Everything from the canisters themselves, they're thicker, it's special steel. They've done some special things in terms of rolling them and relaxing for the welds. They've done a two-part welding process. They peen the welds. There's a 24-hour monitoring system. I believe SCE is the only, and Songs is the only location that actually has a test canister. They actually have an advanced maintenance program, a repair system, and agreement with local agencies in terms of overseeing it. Next slide, please. Still, with all of that, I mean, the community really wants the spent fuel out of there. And the public's frustrated and ultimately mistrustful of what's going on. Next slide, please. The community has never consented to the perpetual storage. As you know, utility customers have prepaid for disposal, and now that's around $50 billion. On a daily basis, this is costing taxpayers a rate of $2 million every single day, and collectively, it's over $11 billion. That was one of the questions that was asked of me when I was testifying before the congressional subcommittee. How much does it cost to store the spent fuel at San Onofre? And it cost $295 million to build the ISFAC and $20 million a year to keep it up. And of course, all of those are sued back to the federal government and then collected. So, and that's paid, as I mentioned, out of the federal judgment fund. Well, the Navy wants its land back, and they want to use it for they don't want the spent fuel relocated. They want it back to train the Marines. And even with a potential for new nuclear project, the spent fuel issue is not going to go away. And of course, we don't want this to burden our future generations. Next slide, please. So to address this long-standing failure of the nuclear waste program, the Spent Fuel Coalitions was formed. Next slide, please. The coalition was co-founded by Orange County, San Diego County, Southern California Edison, and the co-owners San Diego Gas and Electric and Riverside. It's free to join, and it's open to all. Today, the coalition has over 200 members from 11 states with diverse backgrounds ranging from individuals to tribes, to environmental groups, to business leaders, to organized laborers, to cities and counties. Most recently, the city that I live in, Irvine, joined. Next slide, please. The Spent Fuel Solutions, we have two co-chairs. One of them is a Democrat, that's Orange County Supervisor Katrina Foley, and a Republican, that's San Diego Supervisor Jim Desmond. And there you also see Tom Isaacs and Chris Wall. And they work together, and the photo you see of them going back to Washington, D.C. to advocate for the removal of fuel. Next slide, please. The coalition advocates for many of the recommendations that were detailed in the 2012 Blue Ribbon Commission report. These include a single-purpose, autonomous organizations to manage the program, reliable and adequate funding for the same, a flexible repository citing program that is not linked to a single site, and revisions to the linkage between CIS and a repository to allow for near-term offsite storage. Next slide, please. So I'd like you to consider joining the coalition with the executive orders that are recently coming out, especially Executive Order 14302. Federal policy is shifting very rapidly, especially around reprocessing. It could be good or bad for sites like Songs or Yankee, but no doubt about it, funding decisions of billions of dollars are on the table, both DOE and appropriations through the nuclear waste funds. If reprocessing becomes a top priority, we all are kind of wondering what that's going to mean for Songs and Vermont Yankee that have spent nuclear fuel that could be used for reprocessing. Next slide, please. I've also, in February, went back and testified before Congressman Lovins and Chuck Flashman's caucus. Here you can see that there's a bipartisan, and really, this is really, I think, the effort in which is going to be driving legislative change. Later this year, you folks probably, I know you've been talking to Amanda Schaefer in Congressman Levin's office, that there's going to be reintroducing a new policy that's going to be dealing with spent fuel. So I'm happy to see that your representative for Vermont is part of the caucus, and I think we need to do everything we can to encourage others to join. Next slide, please. So everyone asks me, what can you do? Well, I think there's two things that we can do individually and collectively. And that would be, number one, to join and become active in Spent Fuel Solutions. And number two, recruit members of Congress to join the Spent Fuel Solutions Caucus. I know you only have one representative, but I certainly encourage you to ask others to participate as well. Next slide, please. So in closing, I think the most important thing that I've learned in my decade-plus time on the CEP is that progress is going to move at the speed of trust. And that trust is really built on these pillars. And that is demonstrated competence over extended periods of time, demonstrated mutual respect. The facility has to be well-intentioned, and that means, to me, acting in the best interest of the community. A clear and open, transparent process, even till it hurts. And then listening to and responding and adapting to community concerns. That transparency came to light most recently in one of our meetings where SCE released some of the photos from during the inspections. Well, of course, when they release just a few, the question comes up, well, what about the rest of them? So after much soul searching, SCE released 1,749 photos. And I think with that transparency, it really demonstrated that SCE didn't have anything to hide and we're open to questions. And with that, I'd like to go on to the next slide and ask if you have any questions that I might be able to answer. And also on the call is Manuel. He works with SCE. He's been a close confidant of mine, and I'm sure he can help answering any questions probably better than I can.
That's great. Okay. Thank you so much. I have a million questions. So you've raised so many issues that are so pertinent to what we've been looking at here, and I think all decommissioning communities. But I'm going to let other committee members take the lead with beginning their questions. So who would like to start? Marvin? Can you unmute?
How's that, better?
That's great.
There you go.
Thank you.
I was out at one of the meetings of the committee in San Onofre, and I've also been involved in reprocessing at West Valley. So I have some background experience in this. I guess the question I would ask is there another location that spent fuel can be placed near San Onofre? It's different than Vermont Yankee in the sense that we're dealing with salt vapor, and it has a more corrosive influence than the situation at Vermont Yankee. But I'm wondering whether there's another location where the fuel can be taken. So that's one question I have.
Marvin, that's a really good question. Actually, there's a couple of questions there. First of all, before I start, I want to thank you. I've heard of your name often, and I know that you've been active in this field. So I want to thank you for all of your past efforts. So I'll answer the second question first, and that is, can the spent fuel be moved anywhere? There have been questions where can it be relocated to the other side of the freeway on Camp Pendleton to an area which is known as the Mesa. And the Navy has been questioned about that, and they have repeatedly said that no, the spent fuel could not be moved across the freeway to another location on Camp Pendleton. So at this time, the Navy has indicated that they are not open to moving it to another place on the fuel. With reference to your first question, and with reference to in fact, it really has to do with chlorides and the addition of those because it's adjacent to the marine environment. We just had a special meeting on this, if Manuel can tell us exact, and we had a professor, James Burns from, I believe, the University of Virginia, and spent an entire meeting talking about this particular issue. And I think the bottom line is that with the system that's in place, the monitoring that's in place, that the spent fuel could be kept safely at San Onofre for an extended period of time. His words were indefinitely. But as I mentioned, the SCE has done a number of extra things to make sure that the fuel there is safer. The canisters are thicker. And really the Achilles heel on these are the welds. So and they did a lot of extra things on the wells, including the peening. That's a process which is used on high-tech bombers. I went back and they didn't demonstrate it to us back at the plant, but they showed us what it was. So they've done a number of things really to protect the wells. And so I think that the answer to your question is I believe that the spent fuel is going to be safe for a long period of time. It's not forever. It's eventually going to need to be removed. It could be safe for decades and decades, but the bottom line is it needs to be moved. And I think that's one of the problems, that because it is safe for the short term, people just sort of keep continuing to kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I have one other short question, which is this federal legislation that you mentioned. Is there yet a bill? And when there is a bill, can you make sure we get a copy of that?
So there's a couple of bills. I think the bill which is most pertinent there was a bill that Congressman Lovin introduced just before the election, and that was an amendment to the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. I believe that I know that they're in the process of going through that bill and revising it, looking for a lot of input on it, and that bill will be reintroduced at some point in 2026, but I don't know exactly when.
So there's one bill. Is there any other bill that was going to be considered?
There's a couple of other bills, like the Nuclear Waste Priority Act, that deals with stranded fuel to move them up into the queue faster. And so there are a number of those that have been and will be introduced. I think that one didn't move past committee, but the one that I'm really looking forward to is the one that's going to reintroduce those elements of the Blue Ribbon Committee.
Okay, thank you for that.
Just to jump in on that questioning, what about the seismic issues in the area? Is that's part of this? They could remain there indefinitely, but isn't that a very unpredictable concern? Or how do you cope with that?
That's an excellent question, and a question that has come up repeatedly during our meetings. Interestingly enough, the ISFAC was built to higher seismic standards than the domes themselves. We brought in an expert from Scripps Institution of Oceanography, Professor Neil Driscoll, and spent an entire session on that. Independently, the Department of Energy has been conducting seismic tests. Down in San Diego, they have what's called a shaker table, and they brought in actually a test canister that Southern California Edison donated, and it was loaded with dummy spent nuclear fuel. And they did tests on that, both in a horizontal and in a vertical situation, to a test that was over in the neighborhood around 7.5. And with that, they determined that there was no damage that was experienced to the dummy spent nuclear fuel. And Manuel could comment on this because they actually don't refer to, they actually used another scale, and it has to do with acceleration. And Manuel, could you help me with that one?
Sure. And pardon my casual attire. I'm on medical leave at the moment, but yeah. So thanks for the question, and good to hear Dan share his thoughts. The way that you design structures like this is based on what's called peak ground acceleration, or PGA. And so, knowing that we were in that the plant was in an active seismic zone, the two ISFACs, independent spent fuel storage installations, are both built to withstand 1.5 Gs. And using round numbers, understanding the geology around the plant and the nearby fault structures, the maximum credible earthquake would produce about half of the 1.5. So using round numbers, yeah. So again, as Dan has said, I would just reinforce that the spent fuel is just fine where it is. It's not a permanent facility, of course, but that actually it's almost part of the problem in a way. The problem is that there is no problem. The spent fuel is just fine. We know that there are chlorides, so the engineers assumed that the spent fuel canisters would be covered in salts or chlorides, given the proximity to the coast. So those canisters will be just fine. We've inspected 12. We've done 12 inspections so far of canisters, and we've found chlorides. That was expected, but we've not seen anything that would show the onset of chloride-induced stress corrosion cracking. And the professor that Dan mentioned earlier, Dr. James Burns from the University of Virginia, helped to validate, provide an independent validation of that. So, the other part of the question I would just add is that nobody's dying because they're living next to one of these facilities. When we do this DOJ litigation for partial breach of contract, going back to the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, we sue. But the other thing is, members of Congress don't appropriate those funds. The Department of Justice, that money just comes right off the top, so they're not having to sort of, shift priorities and try to consider what you might do better with the $50 billion. So yeah, this issue does suffer for sort of a lack of attention. We appreciate your focus on that, and that is a key part of what the coalition does. The coalition basically does three things. The Spent Fuel Solutions Coalition that Dan mentioned. Number one, most importantly, advocating for legislative reform, and they are doing just that. Number two is to raise awareness for the issue, and that's really kind of a key piece here. So, and you all are welcome to join the coalition. We could use all the help that we can get. Going back to, if I may, the earlier question regarding legislation. One of the other milestones that's coming up in January stems from a May 23rd executive order called something like Reinvigorating the Nuclear Base. And that executive order requires the Secretary of Energy to work together with a couple of other federal department heads and produce a plan by January that addresses a number of different things related to spent nuclear fuel, including the prospect of whether to consider reprocessing spent nuclear fuel. So a lot of folks are working together on that. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Nuclear Energy Institute and Nuclear Waste Strategy Coalition, of course, our coalition, but there are a number of entities pushing to try to shape that legislation in a way that sort of makes sense. And really, there's not a whole lot that's changed going back to 2010, I think it was, when the President's Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Futures produced their final report. It called for many of the same things that we're looking to get done here, including an independent entity that can withstand changes in administrations and shifting political winds. So sorry for the long answer, but thanks for indulging me.
And just real quickly, with reference to that, I actually went down and witnessed both of the shaker table experiments on the canisters, both the ones that was vertical and horizontal, and it was very, very interesting. Also, with reference to the executive order, the one that Manuel was referring to is Executive Order 14302, and I would really recommend that you get up to speed on that because as this shakes out, I think it's going to have it's going to reshape the landscape.
Tony, you had a question, and then Marvin again.
Yeah. My questions can come after questions from the committee members. I just wanted to make sure I was in the queue. So I see Dave has his hand up. So
I don't see Dave's hand up. Okay, go.
Okay. So I guess my questions really are around this spent fuel reprocessing. Can you describe more both I think the benefits are pretty intuitive, but tell me more about what you see as the potential risks or the downsides. I'm always assuming that there's upsides and downsides, and that there's a risk balance between those, and or it would have been done a long time ago, type of thing. So can you talk more about what you see as the downsides of reprocessing, and are there problems or risks that would have to be overcome?
Sure. Well, first of all, of course, I'm not an expert in this field, and I'm really only relaying to you what I have heard from others. And it was interesting in the early meetings that I would sit in with experts on both sides of the table, that there were those that were saying that this is a ticking time bomb, a disaster waiting to happen, and others with significant credentials saying, "Gosh, you don't understand. This is a treasure that's yet to be mined, and we should use those." So from what I understand in listening to things, I mean, France, of course, reprocesses. And as I understand it, France originally believed that the fuel could continue to be reprocessed multiple times. So it would go through and be reprocessed, the fuel could be used and then reprocessed again and again. But actually, they've only been able to reprocess it one time. And so it hasn't been, they never reached the goal that they really wanted to in terms of the reprocessing. Reprocessing is very difficult to do. There's only one place in the United States, I believe it's back in Savannah, where they have been doing it. Other countries have tried. Japan has tried for many years and have been unsuccessful. They've been shipping their spent fuel to France to get them to do it. So it's very difficult to do. It would take, as I understand it, many, many decades for a successful program. And economically, and I think that's a huge driver, it doesn't seem to make sense. Right now, uranium mining it is much cheaper. You can get it and use that. So the economic side of it just doesn't pencil out. So however, that doesn't mean that it's going to stop. And there recently was a $1.7 billion investment that's going to take place in Tennessee towards reprocessing. So I think it's really, there's going to be a lot of effort for that. And I guess my concern in this, a number of concerns, well, of course, one of the drawbacks is one of the byproducts of this is plutonium. And what are we going to do with the plutonium as we get more and more of this? And I think that's a huge drawback in this whole process. The other thing, I know what I was going to say. The other thing that I'm worried about is because it's so expensive, I think there's going to be a look for where can we find some money to use for this reprocessing. And I'm concerned that part of that $50 billion in the Nuclear Waste Fund could be seen as a reservoir to be used for reprocessing. So I think that's a big concern. And that's why I think we really want to watch what's happening with 14302.
Yeah, well, just to intervene, we did a whole committee meeting on reprocessing with Sven Bader from Orono, who is sort of the go-to guy. He's worked with France for many years. And can anybody remember his name? The guy from Union of Concerned Scientists?
Ed Lyman.
Ed Lyman, Professor Lyman, who sort of argued the other point, and that is available on our video archive and well worth revisiting if you have questions about reprocessing. It's an excellent tape. So who's next? Or I'm sorry, Dave, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, I just wanted to make one little comment that bothered me, I guess is the best way, in terms of the use of fake news where you did. Fake news has become a way to try to discredit news, whether it's fake or not fake. And I don't think it adds for someone to use it in the presentation the way you do. I don't think it adds to credibility, and I'd like to see you as very credible. So a little feedback. Maybe I should have done that offline, but it popped up in me as like, fake news. Calling something fake news is fake news. And I understand. I mean, I come from an industry perspective. I understand that there is a lot of specifically directed misunderstanding that doesn't have the best intentions. But I think in our current environment, if we really want to get down to credible science, even using it the way you did, I think is problematic.
Thank you very much. Point well taken. I will remove it from my presentations. I think that in general, what we have really tried to do is not use adjectives and just use the numbers, the data.
Yeah,
Quite well
absolutely. Transparency.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate all comments like that. You know, I'm still learning.
I'm going to jump in with a question regarding the ISFC and the relationship with the military base, because you said that there's special rent paid for the ISFC by Camp Pendleton, basically by the Navy or whoever's, you know, running it. I guess it's all of us in some sense. But is there a special arrangement regarding payments for the ISFC for being there beyond the rent? And, you know, what are the tax implications for California of having those ISFCs? How does that work? It might be different because it's a military base, right? But I'm just curious because a lot of communities are seeing how would they benefit from having an ISFC, and one of them is through tax dollars.
Yeah, and Manuel can help me with this one, but my understanding is that it's really at a federal level, so it really doesn't have anything to do with the local taxes at all. And yes, so there's a couple things that are going on. The SCE has a lease with the Navy for the whole site, and actually, that they just increased the rent on that. So SCE
Front property.
but when you think about it, it's just crazy that here we're paying rent to, or that Edison is paying rent to the Navy, and then suing the federal government to collect that rent back again. I mean, it's circular. Really doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So, Manuel, do you have any other comments with reference to that?
Yeah, no, you covered it well, Dan. And I'm not as familiar with the tax implications like state tax, so wouldn't really be able to. I'm not in a position to answer that part of the question. Sorry.
I see. So you're not aware of any special extra cost relating to the ISFC specifically?
No. No.
Okay, and I had a question also, just these are sort of more relating to the actual decommissioning panels themselves. I'm curious how your panel is funded.
The panel is funded by SCE. So, and my understanding is that SCE then actually goes back to the federal government for reimbursement for the fees for that. Or actually, Manuel, is that? Are they
the judgment?
Question. Or does that come out? There's like $4 or $5 billion which was collected for the decommissioning of songs, and I believe initially the meetings and our gatherings are paid for out of that fund that have been collected for the decommissioning. I'm not sure about the recollecting that for the through appropriation. Manuel, any?
You're muted, Manuel.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
The costs for the panel are non-labor, really, right? So, you know, Dan and others are volunteers, but the expenses that go along with the management of the panel, those are paid through the decommissioning trust funds. Mm-hmm. And as Dan says, the trust funds were accrued through contributions from utility customers over the years, and today are considered fully funded. So, but that's not part of the where the DOE, the Department of Energy, is in partial breach of contract. That's really just related to the spent nuclear fuel. And since the CEP, the Community Engagement Panel, is really, you know, at times dives into this the topic of spent nuclear fuel, it's really not about the safe on-site management, anything that has to do with the physical management of the spent nuclear fuel. So it just comes out of the trust funds and is not part of the DOE litigation.
Okay.
I think just with reference to it, I think it's wonderful because I know it's not the case for all the nuclear power plants around the country that the decommissioning is fully funded. So there's plenty of money there to for the decommissioning of the entire plant.
Yeah, we have hopefully enough too from that fund to complete the decommissioning. Um, One other question just regarding, and maybe it might be useful to go back to the what you're advocating for with the Spent Fuel Coalition. That is a lobbying group that you've created. I expect that SCE is paying for that, the lobbyists, and for the creation of that advocacy body separate from songs. Is that a correct assumption?
It is funded by the County of Orange, San Diego County, Riverside County, San Diego Gas and Electric, and SCE. So
Okay.
collectively, they're funding the effort.
Yeah, and the two counties, especially, they contribute almost a third of the costs for the management of the professional management of the coalition. We have a specialty agency that we've retained. So the counties, the two counties, and you might not, the site is right on the border between Los Angeles County and San Diego County. So both counties are all in, including helping with the covering the costs.
So where's the coalition on the question of a permanent repository? Because obviously even France has had to begin work on a permanent repository, because even if you have the best, by the way, France is all state owned, it's all state done. It's not a private enterprise they're reprocessing.
Yeah.
Even when they're doing sort of the most reprocessing they can, they come up with a lot of byproduct that needs to go into a permanent repository. So I'm just curious, our panel has weighed in to say, really, we shouldn't have a consolidated facility, or we shouldn't forget that we need a permanent repository to be cited in the United States. And that is part of the current language of the current legislation, which I do believe some people are seeking to overturn. But I'm just curious where the coalition and where you guys stand on that question, which I think is a critical question of what are we doing about a permanent repository? Because I know you are advocating for one or more consolidated consolidated storage facilities. I don't think we're even using the word interim anymore.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Dan, did you want me to take that, or?
Sure, Manuel.
So the coalition, and SCE by extension, is very high on the need for a permanent repository, a deep geologic repository. So really, there's four things that we're pushing for, and the coalition is pushing for. So one is a collaboration-based citing process for one or more repositories. Two is an independent entity, right? If you do look at like the organization that Sven Bader works for in Finland, as well as the other active programs in places like Sweden, Switzerland, Canada, those programs are run by a single purpose entity. They have one thing to do, and that is to dispose of the spent nuclear fuel in those countries. And so if you think about the way that we run our program here in the US, it's kind of, it's within the Department of Energy, but I don't know if anybody on this call would challenge that whether the spent nuclear fuel is among the top 10 priorities for the Department of Energy, right? So advocating for a single purpose entity, that's number two. We do see value in consolidated storage. And so that would provide for much more near term. In fact, the Department of Energy, which is running the program at present, estimates the consolidated storage facility could be available in the mid to late 2030s. And right now, I think the time frame is the most aspirational time frame for a deep geologic repository is in the 2060 time frame. So we're talking decades earlier, being able to clear a site like Songs and perhaps Vermont of spent nuclear fuel. And then there's a more sort of wonky issue related to, in the current Nuclear Waste Policy Act, the linkage between the deep geologic repository and the consolidated storage facility needs to be re-envisioned. So right now, what that legislation requires is that you have construction authorization for the deep geologic repository. You must have that construction authorization before you can even start construction on a consolidated storage facility. So, you'd be waiting around, even if the DOE were to find the organization currently running the program were to find a willing host for a consolidated storage facility, you'd have to put that on ice until, decades later when you had construction authorization for a DGR. But absolutely do believe that in all cases, you do need to have permanent disposal. And I would say too, one thing that could be a bit of a risk here is that some folks would view that if you start with consolidated storage, it takes the pressure off of a DGR. So I respect that position, but we'd like to see those as the top 4 things that would go into legislation.
Yeah, that's a great. Thank you so much for that answer. Dan and I were at a consent-based siting conference earlier this year, and we learned that Canada has not had any kind of interim or consolidated facilities. They've gone straight to the deep geologic, and there's a component of consolidated storage next to that. So, as part of the process. So there are different ways of approaching that, apparently. Any members of the public? Tony, I know you've had your hand up, but I want to make sure we have, we do have some time left, but I want to make sure we get to everyone's questions because, I can easily dominate.
Just to follow up to that, it seems like that single entity to solve this is a key first step. That the other discussions about how to link, interim, consolidated, whatever we want to call it, and permanent. It seems like it can't even be really figured out how to do that until you have a consistent long-term single entity focus on that problem. So it seems like all the rest of it should be contingent on the lobbying should be set that up, and then we'll figure out the next 3 steps.
Yeah, Dave, I really agree that that's really the foundation for these things. I mean, I remember testifying before the Department of Energy back in the Obama administration, and then we get another administration that comes in and it's changed, and then we get another administration and things change. So I agree, we really need this, a single purpose, autonomous organizations that's solely focused on this one goal. I have to say, I really like Paul Murray, though. I think he's doing a great job overall in terms of trying to bring all the cats together and getting everybody on a single page and really trying to speak and reestablish some trust in the organization. But I do agree with you that that's the direction we need to move in.
Yeah, he has a tall order, and you're operating in a climate where, less is more in terms of government in many people's minds. So to create a whole nother body like that is really an uphill battle in this political climate, potentially. But there's a lot of interests behind this. We know that. Tony, are any of the members of the public?
Yeah, I just have one really quick question. Actually, I have 2, but I'll take the other one offline because it's more technical curiosity. But early in the presentation, you had said that if I wanted to confirm the figure that the annual operational cost for your ISFC is about $20 billion a year, and that piqued my curiosity. I'm sorry, not billion, million. My apologies. But that still piqued my curiosity because the quoting for here on the East Coast, several ISFCs, Connecticut Yankee, Maine Yankee, for example, Yankee Row, is about half that, 10 million a year.
There's more, right?
Well, my question really was, is this because of having to deal with chloride issues, for example?
And Tony, I don't know the answer of where that 20 million comes from. When I received the question that that was going to be put to me the evening before I was going to be testifying. So I reached out to the folks at SCE and to Tom Isaacs, who's been helping a lot. And that was the number that they gave me, but I really don't know what comprises that number. Manuel may have a little bit better idea of how they got to the 20 million.
Security is a big factor, but
right.
I too can't really not knowledgeable enough to be able to tell you why the cost would be different here at Songs versus at Vermont Yankee.
You've got a lot more casks. It looked like you had about 130 total casks or more compared to our 58, I believe it is. So
yeah, we do have 100. So as Dan said, 123 canisters of spent nuclear fuel, different sizes, but then also several casks greater than Class C waste as well. So it's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot. Skylar, you had your hand up. Can you unmute, please? You're muted, Skylar.
Am I there?
There you are.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great presentation. I have to admit I've succumbed in some measure to purposeful, but some purposeful and some just great concern about the hysteria about the waste on the ocean, and particularly 100 feet from the ocean, the corrosive environment, the seismic risks. Underlying the discussion here is the notion that there will be a breaking of the link between what I understand to be a licensing of a permanent repository before centralized interim storage can be utilized. And the whole idea of moving this nation's high-level waste twice across, literally, if you count up the miles per cask, we're talking millions of miles across our aging infrastructure. And so I can't kind of get it out of my mind. Why are we moving this twice? Shouldn't we, move the stuff that absolutely has to be moved? You've reassured me that the stuff that at San Onofre, it doesn't have to be moved right now. I think there are some plants where that concern is greater. But why not? I mean, it's in good shape. It's well stored. Other places across the country, at Vermont Yankee, obviously in great shape. Could measures be taken to protect it more, increase the security around the SVC? Would make sense. Why this rush to move it now and not to put all that energy and money that's not going to have to be replicated, moving the waste again, into finding a final repository? It seems, and in that vein, an aside, will someone please kill the notion that Yucca Mountain is an appropriate place to send the waste from this country? It's been shown to be an inappropriate waste repository. The district court confirmed that. There's been research since then showing that it's inappropriate. And yet, again and again, even today, people are saying, well, it's a political issue. If we just got rid of that, we would have a repository to start with. I'd like to see that issue kind of taken off the boards. And, so that's my question. Why the rush right now? And if there's a rush to be had, let's put it into creating a permanent repository. Or two or three.
I need some help on this one, but first of all, I would say that the community around San Onofre really wants the spent fuel moved out of there. And while I have shared, in my opinion, that I believe that it's safe, that it's there, there are some that do not believe that it's safe there, and that they really want to see it moved out of there as quickly as possible. So I think that in their mind, it's not a rush, that this is long overdue, and that they never agreed to it in the first place, and they would like to move it out of there as quickly as possible. I think the other thing is it just takes so darn long for a deep geological repository to take place, all the permitting and everything that goes into that. I continue to express my frustration on all of those things. And my friend Roy Payne, who actually is on this call, who is put together and helped coordinate the meeting in Colorado, he said, Dan, you guys need to take a look at it as we do here in Europe. I mean, look at Notre Dame. How many centuries did it take to build that? So, I understand and respect your comments on that, but it's really, I think that there's different sides of views of this, and the local community would really like to move it out as quickly as possible. Manuel, you have any additional thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I do, and it's a reasonable position. I'm not going to challenge your position. In fact, is to my understanding, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, when the NWPA talked about what today we call consolidated interim storage or just plain consolidated storage, was monitored retrieval storage, monitored retrieval storage. So that was envisioned to be a storage facility that would be adjacent to the deep geologic repository. So you'd move it once over miles, park the spent fuel next to the DGR in a consolidated storage facility or a monitored retrieval facility until it was ready to go into the deep geologic repository. So that's my understanding of kind of where we were. Every other country that's working on this is really just working on a DGR, not consolidated storage. But at the same time, I would tell you there are some other factors to think about. One is the Department of Energy is supportive of many of the things that we're trying to do here, including establishing a single purpose entity. And one of the they've renamed consolidated interim storage to get rid of the interim, because in the view of the leadership at DOE working on this issue, it may not be interim. It could be a consolidated storage facility that could be located next to a reprocessing facility if we as a country decide that we're going to have reprocessing. And there are some state level elected officials and federal elected officials who are kind of betting on that. Dan talked about the Spent Nuclear Fuel Solutions Caucus, and one of the co-chairs is Representative Chuck Fleshman of Tennessee, and Representative Fleshman would very much like to have that reprocessing facility. And so if you're going to have a reprocessing facility, you need to have a bunch of spent fuel. So there's a prospect there of having the consolidated storage facility co-located next to the reprocessing facility, and perhaps, and how this all plays out, it could also be next to a deep geologic repository. So Yucca Mountain too. We try not to push on Yucca Mountain. The challenge with Yucca Mountain is really, and siting a facility anywhere is really a socio-political issue. It's not a technical issue. And certainly we did not go through any type of a consent process or collaboration process with state level elected officials in Nevada when Yucca Mountain was established as the one site for a repository here in the US. So we're trying to learn from that history. I would say too, it's important to keep it on the table though. I mean, if you go through a collaboration process and state level of officials and other stakeholders within Nevada choose to have that facility and perhaps work out some type of a negotiation on what would make it palatable to the to folks there in Nevada, Yucca Mountain could be back on the table. That's what I would add.
Yeah, it's certainly a danger what you flagged about the what I would consider misuse of the nuclear waste fund to fund a new entity, to fund reprocessing when we know it's not even sufficient to deal with the matter at hand already. Marvin, you had your hand up. Or was that from before? No. Unmute, Marvin, please. Come on, we can't hear you. Okay, now you can. Thanks.
My understanding about this waste fund is that there have not been contributions to the waste fund for several years now because of a federal lawsuit.
12 years.
Is that correct? And the other point I want to make is concerning reprocessing. There has been an attempt to do commercial reprocessing in the United States at West Valley. And the fact is, reprocessing does not remove the waste. The fission products remain. It removes the plutonium, yes, but it probably increases the waste volume from the beginning when you add the additional chemicals. So those are the 2 points I want to make.
Yes, my understanding is it only reduces it by around 10 or 15%. So you're still going to have a tremendous amount of spent fuel, waste, whatever you want to call it, at the end of the cycle.
Yeah, it's extremely expensive. When I asked the DOE about it a couple of years ago, they actually laughed. The people from the nuclear were saying it comes up every few years, but it's so prohibitively expensive that we don't think it'll ever happen again in the US. But again, there's a lot of billions laying around out there right now. Maybe Bill Gates is going to step up, and Elon and the others. So who knows?
And it's not easy. That's the thing that really surprised me is I thought, well, sometimes here in America, we think if they can do it in France, we can do it here. But I think the Japanese have demonstrated that it's not easy. And
yeah. And it's hard with the workforce, right? Because we're already dealing with workforce issues in nuclear overall. So it's a problem there. Any other questions from the public or community?
Really good
See Skylar's hand again.
Nuclear waste, our students coming up, we really, we know that there's going to be a lot of movement into to nuclear, and really we have our best talent folks that are retiring, and we really don't have enough new ones coming into the field. Actually, in my daytime job at the Nicholas Endowment, we're funding some students from UC Irvine to go up to Lawrence Livermore to study, because we really believe that we need some brain power to be reinvested in this area.
Yeah, well, there's less people in general, so. I saw somebody's hand up, but
Skylar's hand is up again.
Skylar again, and we're almost at 1:10. We had told our guests that we were going to release them at 1 o'clock, so I do appreciate you staying on for maybe one or two more questions, but then we should wrap it up.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Executive Order 14302 has come up. It certainly seems a incredibly robust effort to expand the nuclear industrial base. I'm concerned about two issues. One, that the waste, which promises to be produced by this new effort, particularly in the context of so-called small modular reactors, where I understand that not only is there's no reduction in waste, there's an increased waste, and there's also because of its heat and other chemical factors, it's considerably harder to store. And so I would hope that in your efforts that issue is raised and not just, oh, we'll deal with it later. Let's talk about it now. The other issue that I'm concerned about is I don't see anywhere any attention being paid to the health effects of this expansion. Not only this expansion, but also the old 80-year expansion. There's a huge legacy of deleterious health effects from the nuclear power industry, which have been, it seems, assiduously ignored by the industry. And this expansion really kind of scares the daylights out of me. That without an acknowledgement, the research done into local communities around reactors, the increased vulnerability of children and women in particular to radioactivity, these are not being addressed. And it seems like that if we're talking about dealing with this waste, and that's what it's all about, that's what our concern is, this incredible amounts of radioactivity, that the health of the populace should be integral to its discussion, expansion, and addressing of these issues as a matter of course. Thank you.
That-
Well, just say that I think we would all agree with that as a country, we are often responsive after the fact, and we need to think about these things in advance.
Yeah, I think the economic considerations are really paramount also. And, I would remind people that a number of states, I believe 12 states, until really recent years, had legislation on the books to not allow any building of new nuclear until the waste problem was dealt with. Does California still have that on the books?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Yeah, I think it seems reasonable, a reasonable ask. But anyway, that is another issue. Ann Darling, I think this should probably be the last question.
It's not really a question, Lissa. Several states have repealed those laws, and in Massachusetts, that is currently on the table to repeal our law against new nuclear. So it's a great law. Too bad.
There's been
Sound like it's a done deal, the repeal of it, though. Is that your read?
No, we're fighting it. We're fighting it. A lot of people are fighting it.
I believe there's been an effort in California as well to repeal it that hasn't made it through yet. But to the best of my knowledge, it's still there. Manuel may have some comments on that.
Mm.
That's right. There was an effort. There was an effort to introduce a bill, and they pulled it at the last minute because clearly there were not enough votes. It goes back to my mind, the prospect of small modular reactors. So some of the dozen or so states that have had a ban on new nuclear are, in some cases, they're eliminating the law altogether, but in other cases, the law is being amended to provide for small modular reactors, which I think generally are considered 300 megawatts or smaller. So yeah, it is an effort underway. We're not pushing for or against that. We're not planning on replacing songs with some other form of nuclear reactor, and really just focused on trying to solve the spent fuel challenge is where we're at.
Well, that's a noble effort, and we wish you well. We also would like to, see our spent fuel go, but depends, I think, where and how and who gets affected. And there's no easy answers, obviously. But yeah, so not seeing any other questions. I think, we can wrap up the meeting at this point, unless there's anybody else have any other comments or news items or anything else. I mean, again, you brought up this issue about whether our NDCAP panel, whether we collectively or maybe individually might wish to join the Spent Fuel Coalition that you guys are. It certainly seems like we are in agreement about many aspects of it, maybe not all. How would we proceed with that in terms of bringing that to our full panel? How would we know, like, kind of exactly what the tenor of the advocacy is? You mentioned establishment of a new integrated waste management agency that would be autonomous and fully funded. That seems like it would be a great idea. It's been out there for a while.
Yeah.
I don't really, maybe it's going to be part of the new legislation.
Right.
Is it going to be part of the new legislation? You mentioned that in passing, but I'm just wondering how are we to know if we join the coalition that your advocacy efforts would be reflective of, the things that we share in common?
We have we use the coalition. Coalition has a policy paper. I'll send it to whoever you would suggest I send it to here.
Send that to me.
Okay, we'll do that, Tony.
Thanks.
So there's a policy paper that outlines at a high level the types of things that the coalition is advocating for. Again, they're all very consistent with the final report of the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future. Dan showed an image of some folks representing the coalition, including Tom Isaacs. So Tom Isaacs is a former DOE official. He also was a senior advisor to the Blue Ribbon Commission, back in the 2010 kind of timeframe. So anyway, all those policy principles are spelled out. So if you're looking to try to understand the level to which the policy principles align with your own, that would be a good place to look. But I'll send the link to Tony for you all to consider. And I guess I would say as well, if you would like to have a discussion on this that includes perhaps some of the professional management team that runs the coalition for us. I'd be happy to participate myself if that would be helpful. But if you want to have a discussion about what that would look and feel like to be a part of the coalition, then be happy to make that happen. But in the end, it's very simple. You can just go online to spentfuelsolutionsnow.com and you can fill out a little quick form and suddenly you're a member. But I appreciate that that your NDCAP, it may have a more formal process to consider whether as an entity it would wish to join. So.
Yes, we do. We would need to make sure that everybody was fully on board with that among our panel members. Okay. Well, thank you all for tuning in today. Our committee usually selects our next meeting date, and we usually have a brief discussion of topics. I'm wondering if any committee members have some ideas to throw out regarding our next meeting date and/or the topics to be explored. That reprocessing again was brought up. I don't really remember reprocessing being part of the Blue Ribbon Commission. I did participate back then in some of their meetings and read the report, but I don't know if that was actually mentioned by that panel at the time. I do know that the National Academy of Sciences was asked to do several years study of some of these issues, and they have issued several very, very interesting reports from a very wide variety of experts that were consulted at the academies, and it was done at the request of Congress. And they had some very interesting conclusions regarding small modular reactors and the waste stream in reference to climate change, actually. So I would urge people, I think that we have them up on our site, but that might, in fact, the National Academy's studies might be an interesting next committee topic to investigate. We could sort of look at those studies and come up with some questions. Or are there any other suggestions for future committee topics and dates? I would think we would meet again in probably February.
A thought, if I may, I think January 18th is when we're going to be receiving those reports from the DOE in terms of the executive order. So
that's right. Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
At some point, you might want to take a little bit of time to digest it, but at some point in time, I think it's going to be good for all of us to take a look at what are the ramifications of those executive orders and what adjustments do we need to make, now that they're going to be moving forward with that plan.
Thank you, Dan. That was an excellent suggestion.
Yeah, and I would add, if we do pursue what the new policies are, recognize that some of the DOE people working on those policies are people who have spoken to the committee and to the panel before. Sarah Hogan, for example, is heavily involved with that. Steve Maharis as well. They're not the only people working on it, but I'm intrigued that they are working on that in among some of the other things that they are still working on. So,
yeah, they're all doing 4 jobs now. Let's not talk about NRC. So. NRC's been somewhat eviscerated also from what we've been hearing. At any rate, well, thank you, everyone. What about February? February, Is there any conflicts if we perhaps go for the first week, that first Monday in February? Where's my calendar?
I'm doing the same thing.
I know.
Uh,
It's open. I'm just, I don't even have any room anymore.
Well, as you're looking at your calendars, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come and talk with you and to have this dialogue, and most importantly, to learn from you as well.
Yes, thank you. We really have a very robust site. And we have been meeting for several years, so we have a whole video archive. As I mentioned, on reprocessing was a big one. Even on the legislative changes being contemplated, we had a Diane Kern and, oh gosh, what was his name? The attorney who's been working on this forever and probably writing large swaths of the legislation. Anyway, we've had pro-con kind of discussions that have been really fruitful, and which I obviously need to review because they were so long ago.
I think that's when we had Sven Bader in. Was he was when we had effectively the debate positions between he and Diane Curran.
Well, it was Sven Bader and Edwin Lyman. And then on the legislative changes, we had a longtime industry law attorney.
Yeah, I thought that was Sven as
Do you remember his name, Corey? The attorney we had who was with Diane Kern. It's all on the website. It's all archived.
Yeah, I can look it up if Corey doesn't remember offhand.
Remember his name. Yeah, anyway, it was all about the rewrite of the legislation, Dan, and it was a really fruitful discussion. And Manuel, I think, it bears examination actually probably by your people if they haven't seen it, because it goes in and out of a lot of the different specific provisions of the Nuclear Waste Policy Act and what is looking to be reformed about
Listen,
that.
you're thinking of Jay Silberg.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Jay Silberg, who's...
Ironically, he works for Pillsbury, and actually I worked for them on that oil spill.
Oh, yeah. No, he's an old hand. He's been on, as I think I remember him calling it a merry-go-round.
Yes.
It feels like that sometimes, but maybe things are changing now. Maybe they're speeding right ahead. Maybe they might be going too fast. Who knows? I guess we're all in for the ride. At any rate, first week in February, first Monday.
That would be February 2nd, 2026. I don't think I have anything that date that would be a particular conflict for running. No, that date looks clear.
Okay.
Oh,
let's put that date. Unless somebody has an objection, you can let us know.
Sure.
And we'll discuss those the DOE plan. I think that's if it's issued by that time, we'll plan to do that. And Manuel and Dan, thank you so much for being here today. I know your time's very valuable, and I think we learned a lot by hearing what you guys are going through on the West Coast and also advocating for nationally. So we will consider joining the coalition, and we will examine the advocacy and have discussions among ourselves about that, and see if it makes sense to do so. So thank you so much, and thank you all committee members and members of the public for stepping up. I do believe our next NDCAP meeting is December 4th, is it, Tony?
December 8th.
December 8th, Monday, December 8th.
That's correct.
So we'll do a recap of what we learned today and bring it up at that point then, and see where we go from there. But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a great week ahead, everybody. Thank you for joining, and we'll be in touch via email.
Okay, certainly.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.